Okay, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on Revolution Radio. I'm your host for the next 2 hours. Today is the 28th of January, 2018. We're going to have to fix this here a little bit. We got some, I don't even know if I'm on air right now. We got some lead-in problems here, some technical problems. Show is also being broadcast over UCY.tv. And we'll see how this goes. Anyways, yesterday, I had to get like 26 names in order for me to be qualified as a candidate in the provincial election, which I'm running as a libertarian candidate. I was going to run as an independent, but somebody turned me on to the Libertarian Party after looking at their party platform. I said, yeah, it's pretty close to what I'm thinking. So it wasn't a bad day yesterday, so I thought I'd better get this done. So I took a tour uptown. And what I found, which I already knew, is that 99% of the people don't have a clue about politics. And that's unfortunate. Now, it started out pretty good. The first store I went into was a small local health food store. And a young lady there, 28. And being in a health food store, I'm thinking I'm going to hear something about the NDP or something about the Green Party or something. But that's not what happened. I was thoroughly impressed by this young lady. And that's, she's still in her 20s. And she's getting it. And that's important because not that many young people, and she's not that young at 28, but comparatively speaking, she's young. But when we were talking, she signed the paper, and then we got talking about a few things, and she looked at me and she says, I've been studying this a bit. And I said, well, that's good to know. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we got to get rid of the party system. And that just made my eyes light up. Because when I ran as an independent in 2007, that's exactly what I was saying when I was on radio shows, actually mainstream radio shows. And that's one of the good things about running in any election. You have a voice to Joe Average, okay? You get to talk to the public. And that's why I'm always pushing people to run in elections. I don't care what kind of an election it is, run in the damn thing. Because then you get to move your knowledge. Because most of the people have no knowledge. None. But she was the only one that I spoke to while I was collecting these names who even took a look at the political system. But I wasn't surprised. And this is why we find ourselves in the position we find ourselves in. Because nobody pays any attention. Now, you're on the hook for all the money that gets spent. You're the collateral for the money that gets borrowed. And they do whatever they want. And you're on the hook for it. And then you bitch and complain about it. Then you vote a different color. Then you bitch and complain about them. Then you vote a different color. I mean, this whole system was set up as a deception. And that's exactly what they do, is they deceive you. The political system is amoral as you can get. So how can any good come of that? It can't. You don't have moral men and women running your country. Well, you're in a lot of trouble. So here in Ontario, Canada, the conservative leaders stepped down because of allegations of sexual impropriety coming into a provincial election in June. Now, I go get a coffee this morning and I see on the front page of the paper, splattered all over the place, 3 former Green Party staffers accuse Elizabeth May of workplace bullying. Ooh. Now, I'm not sure exactly what they're up to here, but these political parties have all just been useful idiots since they were formed. They've just been useful idiots for the globalists, used to push their agendas. Now we have Tinkerbell Trudeau, the Prime Minister, not our Prime Minister, the Queen's Prime Minister. That's the other thing that kills me about this country. People say, well, we're an independent country. Well, if you're an independent country, then why are all the politicians taking an oath to the Queen? Why does the police take an oath to the Queen? Why does the army take an oath to the Queen? They serve the Queen. They don't serve you. And who's the Queen? A fictional corporate entity. So if you think any of these politicians give a damn about you, well, you're fooling yourself. You don't, like when I was talking to people yesterday, I said we got to get rid of the party system because you're not involved in anything. You don't pick the representative. The party picks a representative for your electoral district. You don't pick who you want as the premier of the province or the PM of the country. You don't pick these people. The parties pick them. So your involvement in this is none. The only involvement you have in what's running your nation or your province or your stateside, is that you put a mark on a piece of paper, or now you push an electronic button. You're not involved in it. And I don't know why it takes people such a hard time to understand that. This is their system. You didn't set it up. You didn't create it. It says in some old books I was reading is that we were given responsible government. What do you mean we were given responsible government? Who gave it to us? Where did it come from? What was the purpose of it? Well, the purpose of it was deception. That's the whole purpose of it. But I was reading in one text that the word responsible and responsible government doesn't have the dictionary definition of the word responsible. That's brilliant. So if your responsible government doesn't mean responsible, what does it mean? Well, when you look up responsible is someone that is liable, chargeable, and accountable. And you look up irresponsible as someone that's not liable, chargeable, or responsible. Well, who's not liable, responsible, or liable, chargeable, and accountable for their actions? The government. And who is responsible? Well, you are. You're liable for the debts, you're chargeable, and you're accountable. In fact, that's all you are, is an account. You're an asset of a corporation that calls itself Canada. And they feed off of you your entire life. And then when you pass, they close the account. That's the closing of your casket. And they bury you in a corporate graveyard. That's all you are. And we got to come to terms with that. A nation divided cannot stand. And this nation is terribly divided by design. That was the whole point of the party system, was to keep the people divided. The parties don't sit around a table and discuss how they're going to make the country better. They sit on opposing sides of a room and yell at each other all the time. It's just like the legal system, and the political system is a legal entity created by who? The lawyers. And what did our forefathers think about lawyers? Not much. When they first came to these lands, North America, they run lawyers out. They understood who they were, what they were up to, and who they're actually working for. But over time, the weasels that they are weasel their way back in. And they took control of everything. And it's a society. And as a society, you know, if you go steal a piece of pizza, you're going to get jumped on, you're going to get dragged into court, you're going to be fined, and maybe put on probation or something. If a lawyer steals a piece of pizza, he'll be dealt with by the society, same as the school boards. All of these things are separate from you, because they're the ones that run it, and they police themselves. You really got to screw up big time, or they want to throw somebody on the bus to get them out in the open. You know, in the 1200s, way back in the 1200s, when the literacy rate was next to nothing, even those people figured out what the problem was. They went after the lawyers. And their attitude was, we need to kill all the lawyers. And apparently they did a bunch of them in. And then they went to King John, put a piece of paper in front of him, made him sign it. But then the lawyers that were left came back and said, you know, we need to go get these people. He says, I can't. I signed this document called the Magna Carta. And what do the lawyers say? So what? You signed that under duress, null and void. But they held that Magna Carta up in front of us for 800 years. As a wonderful document. Well, they never abided by it. They just considered it null and void, but they hold it up in front to deceive. Take heed, no man deceive you. Well, we've been deceived since the day we were born. And we have to come to terms with that. You know, in the 1500s, Shakespeare play, line in that, first thing you do, kill all the lawyers. I don't want to see people running around shooting lawyers, but we need to take them down through law because they're the opposite of law. You know, they were the Pharisees and the scribes, not to be trusted. Woe unto you, lawyers. So we've been you know, corralled and enslaved the benefit of a few, and they make up whatever stupid rule, regulation, and they call these laws. They're not laws. Just another way to take more of your labor out of your pocket. And now we're at a position here where we got all this nonsense going on about sexual impropriety, bullying, and who's actually guilty of the sexual improprieties and the bullying? Well, your government, your school boards, your churches. Because they're the ones that bully you constantly. They're the ones that are guilty of sexual impropriety. And I'm talking about the early age sex education, where they're training the children that they seemingly have a choice of an LGBTQ2++. Those are their choices, and that's what they're presenting to the children. There's no S in there anywhere. There doesn't seem to be an option for these children to be normal. And that is definitely sexual impropriety. There's also mental child abuse, which apparently is against the law, but the Law Society, who creates the lawyers, who write the legalese into the legislation, make it okay. Well, it's not okay. Nothing okay about it. It's child abuse. There's no other way. It's a clinical case of child abuse, mental and physical child abuse. And that has to be stopped. And it's our duty to stop it. But you're not going to stop it voting for Liberal or Conservative or NDP or the Green Party, because they're just a hive of amoral vipers. And I don't understand why the moral men and women of this nation, or any nation, would allow themselves to be enslaved by a small group of completely amoral men and women. That don't jive no how. So, you know, I was looking around today, and I see a lot of people backing up Elizabeth May. Well, besides the fact she looks like a Canadian beaver with them big teeth of hers, she could probably knock a tree down pretty quick. The fact of the matter is, she's not born Canadian. She's born American. She's a lawyer. Ooh, there's a couple of strikes against her. And hooked up with Morris Strong, Rockefellers, Rothschilds. She was a signatory to the Earth Charter. Hooked up with David Suzuki, who you never would have heard of. Nobody would have ever heard of David Suzuki if it hadn't been for Morris Strong. It was David Suzuki who, at a university in the States, don't remember which one, but met a woman who was a friend of Morris Strong's wife, And it wouldn't take Morris Strong and his wife long to figure out that it was pretty easy to mold David Suzuki. David Suzuki already hated white people. You know, he always tells you this story about the internment camp during the Second World War, where the Japanese were, you know, they were taken from their businesses and their homes, and they were put out in the interior of British Columbia internment camp. I don't know how badly they were treated there. I doubt it, but that set the pace for David Suzuki at a young age. And he's always yammering on about his connection with nature when they were at the internment camps, and his dad would take him out in the bush or out fishing, and he would look at nature and touch nature, you know, pick up a worm, and go fishing. Well, what kid didn't do that? I'll give you exclusive rights to talk to me about the environment, you twit. Now, you know David Suzuki isn't that solid because I haven't had a family and a wife. Put a cot in his laboratory or at the university because he was so enamored by fruit flies. Oh, we've all seen fruit flies. You have fruit in the house, eventually you're going to have fruit fly. But David was really enamored by fruit flies. They put a cot at the university, and he would stay there for extended periods of time, totally ignoring his wife and children. Eventually, he was given an ultimatum. You know, you either need to come home and forget your stupid fruit flies. You know, it's enough to go to, you know, be in the school or the university all day. That should be enough. And he picked the fruit flies over his family. Then he ended up down in the United States, all wrapped up in the civil rights movements down on the West Coast, I think it was. And he said by the time he got out of that, he hated white people so bad that every time he saw one, he wanted to go over and hit him or her. So by his past, he's very unstable. And so once Morris Strong got a hold of him, who was very connected to Trudeau, Power Corp, and Rockefeller. And their job was influence as they moved their agendas forward. There would have been no David Suzuki on television talking about the environment had it not been for the powers that be. And I used to really like that show when I was a kid because I like nature. And so we talk about nature in different places, different countries, all this kind of stuff. But after a while, it dawned on me, this isn't about nature. This is the hate of man. Okay, what was the same story repeated all the time? Man's the problem. Man is destroying nature. Which is what the environmental movement is all about. The hatred of man. Now, Trudeau, who was a member of the Club of Rome, in the Club of Rome. I don't have the full statement in front of me, but therefore man is the enemy. That would be you. Now, I highly recommend that if you want to understand the environmental movement a little bit better, you can read most of it. I think there's a few pages missing. But I have a blog I started years ago, back in 2006 or something. I don't know why, but I can't get into it now. I have to get a hold of WordPress and find out what's cooking there. But there's well over 1,000 posts on that, and you can get to the Cloak of Green through there. And if you go to Canadian Truth with an S on the end of it, .wordpress.com. That's one of my blogs. A lot of information on there. I just put in the Cloak of Green, and you need to read it. You need to read it, especially if you believe in the environmental movement. That will open your eyes. And that was written by an Elaine Dewar, who worked for Maclean's magazine, and Saturday Night magazine asked her if she would do a little story on a meeting. And they brought some people from the Amazon up, and David Suzuki, and I believe Elizabeth May was there as well. So she didn't think it was a big deal, so she accepted the offer, which turned into, I think it was a 4 or 5 year investigative report, because something didn't set right with her. Something wasn't making any sense. So she ended up with a lot of these environmentalists. The head of CanWIA, the Canadian wind industry leader, is in there. Can't remember his Robert. Can't remember his last name right now. David Suzuki, Elizabeth May, Morris Strong, and a bunch of other nefarious people. And Morris Strong was the head of CETA, and it shows there's a lot of tables in there about money being shifted out of this country. But you will never look at the green movement again the same way you may have in the past. Total deception. The media knows about it. So I highly recommend you read that book. Another book I highly recommend you read, which is called The New Despotism, written in 1929 by Chief Justice in England, warning us about what was coming, and he nailed it. It was about the bureaucracy. It was about the idea of making these empty acts for a ministry or whatever, and then they can fill in whatever they want without ever going through the legislature again, without ever voting on anything. And that's what runs us now, is these bureaucracies that were set up, and they can add to whatever they want, whenever they want. So that's important. But as far as Elizabeth May goes in the newspaper here, she passes herself off as a Christian, but she's an earth worshiper, which means she's not a Christian. She's a liar, deceiver, power freak. a globalist. She is a member of the UNPA, the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, pushing for a global government or a global parliament which supersedes our own. It's all about the death of the nation state. Our nation, and handing over all power, all resources to somebody we don't even know, didn't elect, don't got nothing to do with. And in this piece here, we have people standing up for Elizabeth May and saying how great a woman she is. If this was a day of our forefathers when they first came here, people like Elizabeth May and Brown and Wynne and Trudeau would have all been tarred and feathered, if not shot, hung, quartered, buried, dug up, and hung again. At the very least, they would have been tarred and feathered, kicked in the ass, and told not to ever come back. Yet these are the people that rule our lives today. This is how far backwards we've gone. You know, our forefathers came here to get out from the boot of tyranny. They sacrificed everything to get us a new start. Freedom and law. And law is freedom. And over time, the legal system took hold, which is slavery. There's no freedom in the legal system. The legal system is about forcing you to do things you probably don't want to do, forced to take away your labor from you. So legal is not law. Legal is the opposite of law. Just like Elizabeth May professes to be a Christian when she's in fact the exact opposite. We're not supposed to worship the creation. We're not supposed to worship the earth. We were given dominion over the earth, but that was taken away from us through lies and deception. And people are so messed up now. I mean, when I did that thing, went and got those names to qualify me as a candidate yesterday, I wasn't appalled by the ignorance. I expected the ignorance. But it kind of bothered me a little bit. I had a couple people tell me that, it's too bad Jack Layton died because I thought he would have made a great prime minister. That's what people were telling me. And I said, I hate to break it to you, but, I don't like to see anybody die, but Jack Layton would not have been any different than any of these other prime ministers. Jack Layton was a member of the UNPA, pushing for the demise of our nation. But see, they set these parties up because some people would like the rhetoric that comes out of someone like Jack Layton, and somebody might like the rhetoric that comes out of somebody like Stephen Harper, and somebody might like the rhetoric that comes out of a face like Tinkerbell Trudeau. That's a nation divided. But every single one of them are working towards the demise of our nation. Now, when you think about it, being the second largest landmass country on the planet with a ridiculously tiny population, with more resources per man and woman than anywhere else on the planet. And every day, more and more people are struggling. How is that possible? Well, it's only possible if somebody else is running the show. And that's the problem. Now, we've been told over and over and over again that nationalism is a bad idea. Well, who owns your media? Who creates the curriculums in the school? Who owns the churches? The internationalists. Well, if you're trying to take control of the whole planet, this international body, so that they control all resources and every aspect of everybody's lives on the planet, of course nationalism is bad. Because nationalism is slamming the door in a salesman's face. Get your boot out of my frickin' door. My house. Get gone. Not interested. And that's why nationalism got such a bad name. Because it is the stick in the spokes. Nationalism is not bad. Nationalism is all there is. If you're not a nationalist, that means you have no pride in your people, no pride in your country. And you're willing to hand it over to somebody. Then you shouldn't be here. If you're not a nationalist, then you're a threat to the nation. You're a threat to every man, woman, and child in it. And you should be made to go away. A country cannot feed itself and cannot manufacture the goods it requires for the people is no country at all. And there is nothing we can't grow, nothing we can't engineer, nothing we can't manufacture for the use of the people in this country. Nothing. Yet we produce nothing. But that's all about weakening the nation. So it's easily picked clean, the bones that are left. And then they take control of everything. And you lose. So then you end up under a situation of global tyranny. And it's all been done through simple psychology, deception, made everybody weak. So now they're coming up with all this nonsense about, they're really kicking away at these public people. You know, I saw a story where the reporter from CTV who reported on the Brown sexual impropriety situation has now been fired because somebody came forward and said he was sexually inappropriate. So we've gone from that sexual impropriety now over to the Green leader who apparently is a bully. A mad beaver. So we'll just run through this quickly. 3 former Green Party staffers are accusing longtime leader May of workplace bullying, alleging she has created a toxic work environment with conduct that includes yelling at employees and putting them down in front of their colleagues. Rob Rainier, a manager of 6 non-profit organizations before he serves as the party's interim executive director in 2014, said the Green Party has failed to address and prevent a pattern of verbal and emotional abuse by the 63-year-old leader. What I witnessed was her proclivity to be negative and most seriously to berate, belittle, and bully individuals, Rayner said. How we speak to other people can really, really hurt. Well, you see, back in the day, when men were men and women were women, I remember those days. It seems really odd what's going on today, but see, back in the day, if someone was berating, belittling, or bullying an individual, either the person who was being bullied would try to get away from it, and in the case of being employed somewhere, quit the job, go find something else to do, or somebody would get likely a punch in the face. But not today. Not today. We live in the, oh, I'm offended world, of which is a really pathetic world. Anyways, this goes on. May and the party current executive director Emily McMillan, and another high-ranking party official flatly denied the allegations and dismissed them as nothing more than the grumbling resentment of former employees. Now, so here we have Emily, who's a woman, sticking up for May, who's a woman, and Rob, who I think is a man. He could be pretty much anything. He could be transgendered. He could be they. He could be anything. But we'll call him a guy. Is jumping on May. Then we have the women standing up for May. And in the case of the alleged sexual assaults against Brown, we have the women jumping on Brown. And unfortunately, not many of the guys backing them up. But then most of the men in this country have been psychologically nutted, made weak. In a statement issued Saturday, the Green Party said it stands firmly behind May. She is admired and respected by staff, her constituents in Sandwich Gulf Islands, and by the members, party members and supporters, the statement said. Well, our CAO, our municipal CAO, who's gone now, was imported from Saanich on Vancouver Island. Now, he set up the sustainability garbage in Sydney, BC, in that area, Saanich, before he came here. When he came here, I checked out who this guy was, where he came from, what he's up to. And he's doing, as all CAOs do, implements the green agenda, the United Nations agenda, the globalist agenda, without anybody knowing what the hell's going on. Because nobody stands up and challenges any of this stuff. Nobody pays any attention to any of this stuff. So I can see where the people in Saanich might stand up on the side of Elizabeth May, but if they knew who Elizabeth May was, truly was, you would think they would take her out on one of the BC ferries and just kind of drop her off somewhere. Maybe not in the ocean, but maybe on a very tiny little island somewhere between Vancouver and Victoria. Now, I almost had Elizabeth May. She said she would debate me, and we had some conversations about it. She was always rattling off, she'll debate anybody, anywhere, anytime. Oh, geez, that sounds like an open invitation. And I thought I had her, but she backed out. Because if she looked at any of the stuff on my blog or any of the other stuff I've done, she'd know I'm going to wipe the floor with her in a matter of minutes. Totally destroy her stupid little stories. Now, how this even makes a news, I mean, this is on the front page, the major Canadian newspaper. How in the hell does this stuff get on the paper? They're in the paper. You have a couple of employees that are complaining about bullying. This is important somehow? How is this possibly important? I mean, isn't this the party's problem? Isn't this the employee's problem to deal with? Back in the day, it would have been. This is all about shutting down your right to freedom of speech and freedom of thought. Because if the political leaders are being thrown under the bus and they're held up in high esteem, and they're being thrown under the bus, that means you can be thrown under the bus at any time, for any reason. This is about setting up the thought police. You know, like in the sci-fi movies and the old B movies. They control what you read, what you see, what you hear, what you think, what you can and cannot say. And I still have some people in this country saying, well, you know, Canada's still, you know, it's still rated up there as the second best country in the world or something. And that means what? You just got sucked by some more garbage. You know, thought police is a wild thing, man. You know, I had the police on me, and I gotten pulled over, and then all these police showed up. You know, what's going on? And they said, well, you're one of those free men on the land. I go, no, I'm not. I made a video calling it a fraud. But what then I asked him, I said, well, okay, what is a free man on the land thing? I mean, what is that? I mean, you just accused me of it, so what is it? And the cops are kind of looking at each other. Well, I don't know, they just told us to say that. I mean, this is really bad. So finally one of the cops says, well, what it means is you think differently. And this is a crime? You get all these police here because you think, I think differently, or whoever sent you saying that I think differently from the majority of the population, and therefore I must be made not to think that way. And I found it absolutely ludicrous when I got a call from the chief of police calling to, as he said, tell me what my problem is. I said, I didn't know I had a problem. What is it? Well, my problem apparently was that I think I'm diametrically opposed to what 99% of the population think. And this is a problem somehow? How is that possibly a problem? So I think all of this throwing under the bus of these public figures right now is just a ramp up to the further lockdown of your ability to converse amongst one another, to exchange your ideas and your opinions. Because the powers that be know that the people are waking up rapidly. And I think this is just a ploy, and it's also going to be used in the schools to manipulate the children's minds even more than they're already being manipulated. I mean, you don't have to look too far into Elizabeth May to find out who Elizabeth May is. She's a little demon that looks like a beaver. And she should be drop-kicked out of this country ASAP. But instead of putting in the paper who Elizabeth May really is, or who Brown really is, or who these politicians really are, they feed you this vomit, this waste, this garbage. Poor Elizabeth May. People are picking on her. She cares about the environment. Why are they doing this? Right? When I'm told I think differently, then what is a problem for, I guess, the authorities in that, but I take it as a complete compliment. And I normally, when they do something stupid, say something stupid like that, I usually thank them for noticing. Because I certainly wouldn't want to be one of the so-called 99%. I don't think I could live under that situation. To be willfully ignorant. To be totally weak of the spirit, mind, and the spine. I don't know how that I couldn't go there. I have no intentions of going there. But a lot of people seem to be happy there. Don't know why. Just little empty heads running around. Whatever trend is the trend they follow. Whatever science tells them they believe. Or the politicians tell them or force them to do. They may grumble about it, but they do it. Never fighting back, never standing up. Just continuing to bend over and taking it. But as we move along, more and more people are beginning to get it. Like that first lady that signed my paper at the health food store. She blew me away. The only one that had any sense at all day that I talked to. But the fact that a 28-year-old woman standing in a health food store actually said, I've been kind of looking into this a bit, kind of studying it a bit. We need to get rid of the party system. That just made me smile. So while we're in a psychological, spiritual war, it ain't over till it's over. The truth is rising quicker than ever before. A lot of people are still confused, but they're starting to talk amongst themselves. They're starting to do some research. and it's making them stronger. And we will win this. Because we ain't got no other choice. This idea of people saying, oh, well, I'm this age now, I'll be dead and gone before they get it in place. This means you don't give a sweet bejesus about anybody else. Not anybody's children, not your children, not the future of anybody. Which means, as far as I'm concerned, you're already dead. Because when you no longer care, you got no life in you. Just the way it is. Anyways, I was talking to somebody last night. I'm not going to say who. When we come back from break, I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainable development, where it came from and how it got put into our country here. So we'll be back in about 4 or 5 minutes. This is Rocky Boat right here on Revolution Radio, freeaslips.com. And time for me to go for a quick break. So hang with us, and we'll come back and talk about some sustainable development. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And just a note, it and is 100% listener supported. So if you root around the site, you will find a donate button here and there. And I can't tell you how important it is that we keep these networks on the air. You know, those that are against us have billions and billions and billions of dollars at their disposal. We got nickels and dimes. So please, you know, make a donation because we got to keep them on the air. Because we got to keep our voices on the air. Anyways, I was going to talk about sustainable development, where it came from, and it's got David Suzuki attached to it again. But I got a call during the break from a lady in Calgary, Faye, who was instrumental. Her and a group of people were instrumental in getting the fluoride out of the water in Calgary. And she just called me about an update on Monica Schaefer, who is in jail in Germany because they don't like that she finally figured out that the whole Holocaust was a hoax. And she was over in Germany and at a meeting somewhere, and they just came in and picked her up and hauled her off to a high security jail. So I'm going to bring Faye into the show and get an update on what's going on over in Germany. As soon as I can dig out here we go. So we're going to bring her into the show and get an update. And this is the beauty of what's going on right now. Okay, there's so many people looking at so many things.
Hello?
Hi, Faye.
Hello, Ron.
Yeah, welcome to the show, dear.
Are we online?
We are on air, yeah. And you have an update on Monica Schaefer. Now, you for the people that don't know, could you give some background on Monica?
Okay, I guess what happened is
Monica. She's an Albertan, right?
Yes, she lived in Jasper, Alberta.
Right.
And she went to visit her brother in Germany. And I got a note from her that they had been to visit Nuremberg, and she was all excited about their trip. And I guess what happened is on January the 3rd, she and her brother went to a hearing. Now, I don't know if people know the Zundel story. You know, he was the guy who was talking about what really happened during World War I, etc., or World War II in Canada. And he went through a real witch hunt, and there was he was really shut down. It was like freedom of speech, hate speech stuff was the charge that they put on him. And he ended up spending, I think, 2 years in prison in Canada, and then another 5 years he was imprisoned in Germany. And it was simply because he was getting people to look at the false history that we have been taught. So anyway, his lawyer in Germany was a woman by the name of Sylvia Stoltz. And I guess she was under some they had some kind of public hearing because there are very heavy hate speech laws in a number of countries over there. I think there are about 13 countries where you are not permitted to talk about, past history. Anyway, Monica and her brother went to this hearing, and I guess at the start of the hearing, I guess they had a little bit of a break, and what happened is they came in and they grabbed Monica and they locked her down, 3 policemen put her in handcuffs and they just carted her off. Her sin is that she has a website where she was apologizing to her parents because, like, she was of German Canadian. Her heritage is Germanic. She and her brother are from Edmonton, and they were German. And I guess during when she was a teenager or whatever, she heard about, history, the Holocaust, and she said to her mom, well, why didn't you do anything about the Holocaust when you were in Germany? You lived there. You could have done something. And her mother said, well, we didn't know anything was going on. And so Monica made some kind of a web post where she apologized in retrospect to her mother the way she had treated her, because she didn't realize that when she was a young girl that what really had happened in history in Germany. Anyway, right now Monica has been in prison. What's the date today? The 28th. So she was arrested on the 3rd. She has been in jail for 25 days now. They have not had contact with her. She is under complete, isolation. They're doing to her what they did to Zundel. And, we have to start to stand up and teach people around us what really happened during, World War II. That war was just a witch hunt. We've told that Hitler was the monster. Well, he was not the monster. There were actually 3 monsters. Churchill, he really had a hate for Germany, and Hitler was standing up to fight the Bolshevik communism, and he was trying to keep that influence out of his country. And what happened is Hitler actually built his country up like they had been devastated during World War I.
They were completely. They did to the Germans what they're doing to us now. They made them so weak of the spirit, mind, and spine they couldn't stand up to anything. And then along came Hitler and reinvigorated the people.
Yeah, he made the people strong. And I have a lot of good friends in my life who are Germans. I had a very strong next-door neighbor, and she helped me learn some things about history that I never knew. And, she taught me about pesticides, and she taught me about alternative health. I have so many strong German people in my background, in my life, that I have to give thanks to. And right now, we are under a total oppression regarding speech in Canada. There was a man by the name of Arthur Topham who had a website, and that website was shut down last spring by, our fascist courts. And they're trying to do to Canada just what they've done in all of these other countries, is to shut down, our right to freedom of speech.
Well,
if people are interested, you can go onto the website. There's a website, it's in German, called Wir sind, WIR-Zint, and then Monika, Monika, with hyphens between the words, Wir-Sint-Monika, and it will give the update. And if you want to look also, her name is Monika Schaefer. Her posting is something like, sorry, Mom, I apologize for, how I treated you. And so you can check those out, and we would like to have letters, send letters to the editors, send letters to all of the politicians. If you have an MP, why, as a Canadian citizen, we haven't even had very much press about this.
I haven't seen anything about it in the newspapers.
There was an article in the Edmonton Sun, I believe, and there was a brief CBC article, but there has been total media shutdown on this. Now we have to ask, who the heck is controlling the media, and why are we not being given information?
Well, the media, there is no independence left.
That's right.
The independence disappeared from the 70s onward. And if it hadn't been for an independent press back in the 70s on Vancouver Island when I was over there, and people were protesting, and I don't like protests, and I don't like people who are asking people to sign petitions, because that means you're asking somebody else to fix a problem. But if it hadn't been for the independent newspaper, I would have never got an article written, because when I went and asked these people what the problem was, and I had just landed there, and so I went to the city hall, I went to the welfare, I went to another outfit, a government outfit, and went through the system 3 times to make sure I got this figured out. Wrote a letter to the editor, it was quite lengthy, and took it to the Nanaimo News and gave it to the editor. He read it, looked at me, and told me there's no hope in hell this is ever getting printed. And so I did find a little independent paper. And all he said to me was, he read it, and he said, "Can you back this up?" I said, "It wouldn't be on paper if I couldn't back it up." And he thought it was important enough. Well, at first he told me he couldn't put it in that week because he was headed to press. I got back to my sister's place, and he called and said, "This is too important to wait. I pulled a bunch of other stuff, and you're in. But I had to have to warn you. I had to call the mayor and that and tell them this was coming at them." And then they phoned me, the mayor's office, and that phoned me offering to take me out, seafood and steaks and wine or whatever. I could have been working for those guys real quick, because I know how they operate. They want to schmooze you and get you on side, but I don't have none of it. But you can't do that anymore, right? There is no independent press anywhere. When I worked in the States after the Hurricane Andrew, and I saw the corruption going down there, and I was keeping notes, and I went to the Miami Herald and asked, I said, we need to do a 2 or 3 part series on this. And the editor there read that, and that was in 91 or whenever. And so that's like pretty much 20 years later from Nanaimo. And the editor of the Miami Herald read my stuff, and he looked at it, he says, "We're not printing this." I said, "But it's the truth. The truth. We don't care about the truth." Okay, that's a fairly major newspaper. And I went all the way down to a bi-monthly church newsletter, and I couldn't get anybody to print anything. And finally I ran into a reporter from New York that was down there, and gave him all my notes, and he went through them. He said, this is amazing. This blow the lid off of this stuff. Well, take it with you, and if you can print it, print it. But this is the world we live in.
Well, that's right.
The media is 100% controlled.
We have the same problem here in Calgary with, our fluoridation battle. We were in the trenches with them for about 20 years, and it was partly because the media kept shutting us down at every turn. However, the real story is, Calgary back in the 1950s and 60s, we had an independent newspaper here called the North Hill News. And it was created by, I think he was a Calgary alderman. His name was Roy Ferran, and he realized it was corrupt in Calgary, so he set up the North Hill News. And thanks to the North Hill News, the city of Calgary kept fluoride out of Calgary all those years during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then it was in 1989 that, Ralph Klein pulled the dirty trick on us and did a quickie, tricky plebiscite and fluoridated us. Now, when we finally went into the trenches, we started to do independent newsletters and handbills, and we finally informed the public. But one of the coups that we had was we had an article from the Calgary North Hill News that we presented to City Council when we demanded that they take the fluoride out. And it was a damning article explaining how I think his name was Dr. Hill, had managed to keep fluoride out of Calgary's water way back in the old days. So that's the only
now they're
reason.
trying to put it back in, right?
Pardon?
Now they're trying to put it back in.
Well, they're trying to put it back in, but we have drawn a good line in the sand, and a lot of citizens are really monitoring them. So, we're still doing our work on that one. I mean, it's eternal vigilance when you live in a city, right? You have to really stand up. Democracy is not a spectator sport.
No, it's not, and most people think that's what it is. Most people have really no clue, and it doesn't take. And you guys out in Calgary are a prime example of that. It doesn't take everybody in the city to get something shut down or something changed. It just takes a small group of dedicated individuals, and I think what you guys found was that once you started really holding their feet to the fire and really shining the light on them through your handbills and whatnot, that you put the fear into the council. You actually feared the council.
It got to the point that no councillor could go to a meeting without people saying, when are you going to take that poison out of the drinking water? It's a criminal act to be putting caustic, corrosive, hydrofluosilicic acid into public drinking water. And when enough people came out with that soundbite that it was a criminal act, it just diffused it.
Yeah, you just held their feet to the fire and stayed on them. And this is the other problem that the people in this country from coast to coast to coast, I guess, don't seem to get. That municipal hall, if you don't go there and you don't hold your feet to the fire on whatever issue it is, silence is consent.
That's right.
Right? And they will just keep plowing along with what they're doing.
And the people that do go there are usually those who are lobbying for industrial or corporate interests, and they're schmuzzing the scene. So
yeah, you see two different ways the council approaches the people. If someone is coming in and they've got a deal going in the back room, it doesn't matter if it's about sustainability or transit or whatever the hell, or high density housing or whatever it is, or bike paths, they're so welcome, and the council is so impressed with the presentation. But if another group comes in to highlight something that needs to be fixed, something maybe a little nefarious that took place, they do not get the interaction with the council the way with the other people, and they're just, oh, thanks, goodbye, get out of here. And then what happens is that people, this I think where you guys really got it, because once you realize that we can go to the council, but we're not presenting what they want or what they're told to want, and therefore you get kind of brushed aside. And a lot of people go, well, we went, they didn't do nothing, and that's the end of that. No, that's the beginning of it, and then you figure that out. And I always like this handbill thing that you guys do out there. Helen calls me sometimes, and you guys are just carrying little pieces of paper in your coat pocket or your purse or whatever it is. And when you're talking to someone, you just hand it to them.
Yeah,
you can't get any easier than that.
We have the contact numbers of the city councilors and the email addresses so that people can just flood them with, the request and just demand that they stop the corruption. And that is so easy for people to do, just everyone you meet, you just say, can you please help with this? And people will look at it and they say, oh boy, yeah, it's one small thing that I can do. And when enough people do just one small thing, it's like an avalanche, right?
It is. It is. If you look at, I saw a video the other day. I don't even know how we ended up there, but I wasn't really looking for it. I ran into a video of Ernst Zundel talking to a Jewish man, and the Jewish man lived in France, and he got looking at the Holocaust, and he got looking at the war. And it was kind of amazing to watch because we have this French Jewish man and Ernst Zundel talking, and the Jewish gentleman said the whole thing's a fraud, right? You know, once he looked into it, and it's the same as Monica Schaefer, right?
Yeah,
once you look.
I actually gave her a book. There's a book called Hellstorm, and there's also a video. Now, you kind of have to watch because they are censoring the internet, so you have to find where there are certain sites that will host it. But the documentary entitled Hellstorm really tells what the Allied troops did, and it's damning, you know. They were raping women left, right, and center, and it was just a bloodbath. Like, the Germans were really brutalized.
Well, what was the name of that city that didn't have anything to do with the war? It didn't have anything to do with the war. There was no military there. What the hell was the name of that town? It was more of a, art town than that. I can't remember.
That was...
But they totally obliterated that city.
Yeah, and they actually carpet bombed almost every German city, but it was the city of Dresden.
That's the city. Dresden was
they also carpet bombed. Was it Nagasaki? Like 2 days later, like they used Dresden as an example,
right?
as a trial test, and then they went to Nagasaki right after.
Yeah, and
the Allied troops were vicious.
It was horrid. And one thing that Jewish gentleman said that from France, he said, he looked at Germany and there was only 3.1 million Jews or something. So if there's only 3.1 million Jews, how do you exterminate 6 million? The whole thing's a complete fraud, right? I mean, Hitler was financing the movement of the Jews out of Germany.
Yeah, he was
doing his damnedest to end the war and not get England in the war. He kept making peace offerings, and all of that was shut down. I mean, they hold Winston Churchill up as some kind of a British hero. This guy was as low as a belly snake, or a snake's belly.
I think there's a book. I think it's Michael Walsh. He has written now about 15 books where he's really drilling down.
Yeah, he's a prolific writer.
Find those, and there's another website that's just phenomenal. It has great documentaries, and it's called impartialtruth.com. And I think you can find the Hellstorm documentary on that website. So it's impartialtruth.com.
I'll have to go look at that one. I don't think I've ever been there.
Right.
But it's so important that people keep learning. What's going on here is just this is getting ludicrous. What is going on in this country? I cannot believe the people in this country.
Well, we've been taken over,
laid down like this.
Yeah.
It's
the Bolshevik takeover. It's the same gang, same agenda. They just repeat the agenda over and over. History repeats because we never learn the true history. And I guess one of the people that was really demonized in Alberta was Jim Keegstra. He was he was the one educator in Calgary schools that was teaching his students to think and to question, and he got fired. And his colleagues knew, but like nobody could kind of stand up for him, and it was the court in Red Deer that really came at him, and they were given instructions that they were to find Keegstra guilty come hell or high water.
Yeah.
And that's the court system we have. They're run by a nefarious group behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean it's that I haven't talked to that guy for quite a while, but that Ottawa school teacher that came on this show, and he was a school teacher in a school, and when he would be at the teachers' lounge or whatever, lunchroom or whatever, and he'd been doing a little bit of research, and he would try to discuss climate change or any of this stuff, and he said they would just look at him with daggers in their eyes, right? And so he decided this wasn't healthy because he might just, what happens, the other gentleman you say, get dragged up. And so he became a floater teacher. And so he did the show, and I don't know whatever happened to him, but after the show, the guy got back to me, and he freaked me out because he said, you know what? I was scared to do the show. I've done the show, and now I've made a decision. I asked him what the decision was. He says, I'm not lying to the kids anymore. So I don't know what that did to his teaching career, but this is how bad this is. You know, there are lots of teachers out there that know this is wrong.
That's right.
But they're so afraid of, you know, they like that teacher that you were talking about. They make an example out of these people, and it puts the fear in the rest of them. Instead of those people, those good people standing up and with the accused, who's actually telling the students what they need to do, they bow down, and that's ass backwards. You know, if they would just stand with their colleagues, this would end pretty quick.
Well, we now live in the information age, and the information can't be shut down. Like, it's very easy to find and do your research. If you know how to do real research,
yeah,
you can find it all, and it's there on the internet, so there's no excuse anymore. We have all the tools we need, and so we just have to stand up and encourage everyone all around us to just do what's right. And we can clean this mess up in no time. When people can start together and stop playing the game.
Like, I don't remember, I don't know if you remember, but when I was in Calgary in the 70s during that Saudi oil crisis, where we were being held hostage by the Saudis, we didn't have any internet, and you know, it's always problem, reaction, solutions. So, you know, they have templates that they pull off the shelf. They may rebrand them a little bit, but they just use certain templates because they've worked for them all this time. And when I was in Calgary, we had the Saudi oil crisis. We're being held hostage. We got to do something. The news was always dark because there was no gas. People were running out of gas. And it was too expensive, and the cars were too big. And that whole Saudi oil crisis was just about opening our borders to foreign manufactured stuff, and that was the beginning of the sucking of our industry out of our own country. But I went to an Earth Day, which I didn't know what an Earth Day was, with a friend of mine, and when we got there, it was a beautiful, you know, green park, beautiful trees, beautiful day. And over here on the news, it's all dark about the Saudi oil crisis. Over here, it's all clean and beautiful, and it's all set up. And they were pitching electric cars, biodigesters, solar panels, windmills, all this kind of stuff as a way to make us energy independent. And just like the teacher you were talking about that was hauled into court. So we went to this thing, and I said, okay, well, maybe this is a solution. Because there's the problem, this may be the solution. So we went back and me and my friend designed a hybrid car. Didn't take us that long. And we were pretty proud of ourselves, actually. And then, just like that teacher you were talking about, Halton Court, my grade 7 teacher, I guess, she slapped me in the head all those years later when I'm in Calgary. She slapped me and said, "Hey, stupid, what'd I tell you in school? Believe nothing, nothing. You read, see, or hear until you personally verify it. Failure to do so opens your mind, accepting all manner of propaganda and outright lies as truth." So here I am. There's the problem that's presented. There's the solution. And I haven't checked any of this stuff out. So I went to the library, which is a lot different than today. Like you said, there's no excuse not to know today. It's so easy to dig. I mean, they write every freaking thing down because they write it down. If you don't read it, you don't complain about it, you don't push back on it, then you've consented to it, even though you didn't read it. And it's no different than the fine print in the contract. You read the big stuff, buy a car, you read the big stuff. You never read the little stuff because you need a freaking microscope to read it. And then something happens, you say, well, this is wrong. Well, no, it's in the fine print. Well, I didn't read that. Well, you consented to it because it's in front of you, even though you didn't read it.
Well, that's why we're...
Well, in the library, they have the reference books, so I got a whole bunch of names in that when I was at the Earth Day, and so I spent some serious time at the library trying to connect these dots, and I finally did. And when they lay it down, he said, "This whole thing's a freaking fraud." So when I was here and they started bringing the windmills in here, all they did was they just kind of rebranded the template a little bit. Same template. Different solution, different problem. It was the Saudi oil crisis. It was holding us hostage, and all of this renewable energy was the solution to energy independence. Well, skip forward, same stuff. Now, once they got what they wanted through that Saudi oil crisis, all of a sudden the electric cars were taken off and destroyed. The windmills that had been put up rotted in the fields and so on and so forth because they got what they wanted. So now, a bunch of years later, all of a sudden, we're pushing the very same agenda, only this time it's to save the frickin' planet. And I mean, all of the research is out there. All of the writings are out there. You can figure this stuff out pretty quick for yourself. But people are so inundated, unlike our forefathers who maybe had a local paper or some, you're inundated 24/7 with all this propaganda. It's just constant. And even a lot of people that question submit.
I listen to Revolution Radio a lot, and I've been, I was listening the other day, and I just was really angry because I had a cousin. It was about a year and a half ago, and he died of what kind of cancer? I can't remember, but anyway, as I was listening to Robin Falkoff's program, she had an alternative health practitioner on her program, and he was saying all of those forms of cancer there are cures for, like curcumin is one of the cancer. One of the substance herbs that is used to cure cancers. And I was just, I was really feeling tearful because this cousin, he died unnecessarily. And nobody was there to give him the alternative information. And, this is the thing that we can do is to share information with other people and wake people up, because we've been lied to in schools, we're lied to by our health professionals, we're lied to by media, but there's no excuse because we do have Revolution.radio, and we should be supporting them and passing that out for people so that people can, get the real news and do like Nighthawk. Nighthawk has his farm, and he's growing all sorts of vegetables and tobacco and tomatoes and God knows what. And
I was gonna grow some tobacco. I was looking at that, and I thought, well, that ain't that difficult, right? And the thing is, you're absolutely correct. I mean, my uncle's 90 now, and still doing his gardens, right? And he understands, and that's something. People are so inundated with the propaganda that you can, if you just get back to eating real food, you're going to solve a lot of your problems. You go in a grocery store and look around. I mean, if you just go and stand in a grocery store and look around and understand what Kissinger said, control the oil, control the nation, control the food, control the people. So they control our energy and they control our food. But if you go and stand in a grocery store, and I was absolutely amazed because apparently there was no such thing as a grocery store till 1945 or 6 or 7 or something. No such thing as a grocery store. You used to go to the butcher store, you used to go to the veggie store, and so on and so forth. You go to the bakery. But when you stand in a grocery store and you look around, you say, what in this store has not been adulterated? Basically, everything in there has been messed with.
That's right.
It's not real food, folks. And you wonder why your health is so bad. My relatives lived on farms, and my one uncle was 99. I just lost an uncle about this time last year. He was about a month off of 95. But the thing was, his mind was still sharp as a frickin' tack. In fact, they came all the way from Quebec down here for my mom's 80th birthday, and he was 90. He was 94 at the time, and he'd broken a rib or something, in a hell of a pile of pain. But they came down anyways. But these are tough people. They're not running to the government all the time. And that particular uncle, my uncle, their brother, had been killed at a fairly young age, in his 20s or something, in a car accident. And they were in a poor neck of the woods, and they were trying to scramble up some money for a funeral. And this is where the government gets into you, okay? The government was offering to bury these guys, I think it was 3 or 4 of them killed in the accident, and supply a beautiful, oak or mahogany, whatever we make caskets out of it. And my uncle, who just passed away last winter, explained to my mother, who was considerably younger, there's no way in hell that I'm going to allow the government to bury my brother, right? Because he got it. He saw the encroachment of how government deceives you through offering you benefits.
Right.
And we know what the great deceiver is all about. And so they got some cash together and got a low-end casket. And my mother was really ticked off because these other people had these really nice caskets, and her brother had this, econo casket or whatever. But it's about responsibility and independence. And every time you accept one of their so-called benefits, of course you pay for that benefit because the government doesn't have any money. You help to build these bureaucracies which continue to just control you, and then eventually you end up with what we got now, which
That's
is
right.
this is the most beautiful country in the world, and the fact that there's anybody homeless in this country is not acceptable.
And longevity is our birthright. If we have proper water and proper food, and we have to have good relationships, instead of people are kind of stuck behind their computers, and I don't know, they've managed to fracture our communities. So, they're no longer the barn dances and barn raising events.
No. Well, when we moved to this town in 1969, the town was 28 people, had 2 furniture factories here, and these were just top end furniture makers, and this stuff was shipped all over the place. And we had two roller rinks, I think. The drive-in in town. We're on Lake Huron. The place would just flood in with people in the summer. Everybody was having fun. There was dances Friday and Saturday night and Wednesday night, all the way up and down the lake shore. Today, the town's 7,500 people. There's nowhere for people to meet.
Yeah.
The dances are gone. I remember a farmer used to have a drive shed, and they used to do barn dances. That's what got me going on this, right? And so they had something for every age group of people. People were happy. They were conversing all the time. And yesterday, when I was getting those names to qualify me as a candidate, that's one of the things I was bringing up with people. Do you see any happy people anymore? And they're going, no, it's terrible, right? And it is terrible. You know, when I talk to the students, it just breaks my freaking heart. You know, a little town of 7,500 people. The school's full of cameras. The kids can't touch each other, can't play baseball, can't do a cartwheel, can't do anything. And it's messing the kids up big time.
One of my favorite movies is Brave New World. You know, they've really done that to us. They've taken it and they've turned everybody into, what is it? I'm not too stupid and I'm not too bright, but to be a Delta is to be just right. Blah, 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 blah.
Well, I had a guy, I thought maybe this was the same guy when I ran in the election a long time ago. I was talking to this guy on the main street. My brother-in-law was there, and I pulled over, and we got talking, and he was talking to this other guy, and Bruce Ellis, my brother-in-law, is running in the election. And this guy was so impressed with himself, right, that he was, I said, people are not informed at all. They don't know anything. It's ridiculous. And he says, I'm extremely well informed. I go, really? And he goes, yes. I read both papers, the left and the right. And I thought, so you're like doubly stupid, right? But he was convinced that he was highly intelligent because he read both the right and the left propaganda papers.
Oh, no.
But, you know, I honest to God, if you want to have some, like, I went back and I looked at some videos of Alberta in the late 70s through to about the mid 80s. And I did the same thing because I lived in the Vancouver area too. And I went back and I looked at the same era of videos. And that's about where things really started to break down. And our cities and our towns and our communities have totally, completely changed from what they were up into about the mid 80s.
I think it started right after the JFK assassination. I think everything started to go just totally around 180 degrees the opposite direction.
Well, that's when they started to push a lot harder, right? You know, the idea of the 60s movement, of which I got the tail end of it really in 69 through about 74. But you know, they always take each generation and move them somewhere, right? So, you know, my parents were listening to Elvis Presley and the Everly Brothers and stuff, and you know, they'd been watching Lucy and you know, Ed Sullivan and that, and all of a sudden, Ed Sullivan out of the blue shows up, the Beatles and Rolling Stones and all these other bands. So that pushed the, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll stuff, right? And so now it's just a generational thing. So now we're into the LGBTQ thing. We're into the oh, I'm offended thing. So it's always been a manipulation of the mind. JFK, that really put a stop, I think, to the civil rights movement
Yeah,
Uh, uh,
when you can get rid of a president in broad daylight and get away with it, that
yeah.
is just criminal.
Well, they are criminal, and the worst part is, and this is what I can't get through to people enough, is that this is spiritual and psychological, and it's the moral against the amoral, and you never see any remorse. They can go and shoot the president of the United States, and nobody shows any remorse because they're amoral. It's the same thing as George Soros when he took down the Philippines. There's that video or that interview, I don't know, it was 60 Minutes or whatever, but they're discussing the fact that George Soros was the one that took down the economy of the Philippines. And the reporter asked him, or the interviewer asked him if he feels any remorse for that. He said, no, that was an amoral act. There is no remorse in an amoral act. And our political system is completely amoral. So everything that's being done to us now, they don't show any remorse about it because it's not something to be remorseful about because it's an amoral act. And we got to get the moral code back into this thing because without that moral code, you're lost. You know, there's no rules, there's no nothing. They just do what they want. And you know, but when we talk about history and that, when I mean that it didn't surprise me, but it kind of surprised me when the reporter at Austin, Texas, went to the university to ask the student body how they felt about the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He didn't find one student on that campus that knew that Kennedy had been assassinated.
Yeah.
You see, and this is about the problem with the memory bank. Okay, you remember it, I remember it, but the students aren't taught that. We don't know that. Because the students said all we were taught was he died while he was in office. That's all we know about Kennedy. So, you know, they take the Lord's Prayer and everything out of the schools for a space. Then the kids don't know anything about it. They have no memory bank. And it's you know, that's just a moral guidepost, really. So then all of a sudden the kids are watching Little Mosque on the Prairie on TV. Then they get to school, and they say, and the teachers now are starting to teach them about Islam, which is what they saw on the TV. So it's normal to them.
Yeah.
And this is how they manipulate each generation. And they separate the children from the parents.
And, you know, in the old days, we used to learn from our grandparents and, you know, other elder relatives. I had some very good cousins that I learned a lot of things from.
Exactly.
But now families are so fractured and spread all over by distance that we've lost the family connections.
The state has taken the children, right? So when they take down, like Chris is in Kingston, and then that's where John A. Macdonald was at, and so they're eradicating John A. Macdonald, who was the first prime minister of the country, because apparently he was racist or something, and they're pulling signs all over the place. They're erasing the history.
So just encourage people to talk about Monica Schaefer and tell other people about what's going on. She actually had run as a Green Party candidate, and I think she and Elizabeth May had some kind of tiff. And especially once Monica started talking about, you know, the Hitler alternative history, she really got deep sixed from the Green Party.
Well, that's it. So, once you break loose of the cult, right? They don't want nothing to do with you anymore.
Let's dump these parties.
Have you got? Can you do those? Links again to stuff about Monica?
Yes. Let me see. Wir sind Monica, WIR-SIND Monica, or SIND-Monica, MONIKA, and the other one was, let me see, what did I have written here? Just Google Monica Schaefer, Schaefer, and her story was Sorry Mom. It's on YouTube.
Oh, okay, I'll have to watch that. It's just, okay, that's perfect, because this is what this.
If people could write letters and just talk to their friends and neighbors, about the Canadian that's in prison. She's been in prison for,
3 weeks
25 now, and nobody knows a thing about it. And what's Twinkletoes doing about it?
He's having lunch with Soros today. No, it's gotten that bad. When you can take one of our people who's done nothing wrong and just pick him up out of a meeting or a crowd or whatever and just hustle them off and throw them in a high security prison with no access to outside sources, we got a problem.
That's right.
Because why are not all of the political and the media, banging their fists on the desk, going, this get our lady back here, right? That shows you just how corrupt the system is. I mean, if you can't protect your own, that means, right. If they're not protecting her, they're not protecting you.
And the other thing, I think we need to boycott Germany, fascist Germany, any German products. You can't buy any more Mercedes or Volkswagens.
Well, I watched some videos on Germany when a guy was talking to the German people about why they're so passive now. And it was really hard to watch. I'm sure Adolf's rolling around in his grave. That they're basically, like you said, they're not allowed to talk. They're not allowed to speak on certain subjects. Well, who the hell has the power to tell you can't say what's on your mind? Nobody has that power. Nobody. And if we allow this to continue, then we're in a huge pile of trouble. Anyways, I think we're just about out of time. So glad you called in. I got a bombshell that was handed to me yesterday or last night, but I got to do a little more research on it. So I'm really glad that you called, because I know you're up on what's going on in Alberta and with the people in Alberta, and you're obviously another good researcher, and which I can't encourage people enough. Turn research into a game. Don't make it a problem. If you read an article somewhere and you see an expert or this guy or that gal who suggests something,
question everything.
Research it. We're out of time. We gotta go.
For intelligent people. UCY.TV.
Take care, everybody. Have a great day. We're gone.